listener to a Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora spotlight broadcast special inside of the Cafe Kubal studios, picture in picture with Randy Edsall, who spent many years as a coach in the world of college football. And I am more than honored and privileged to have this connection to Randy that we built over time, to have the opportunity to speak with him as he has overseen teams that I was covering over the years, and to now be able to speak about the greater scope of collegiate athletics into the NFL. So with that being said, Randy, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great, Dan. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And you and I talked about this before. I said, now that you've retired, do you have any thoughts that you're going to unretire? And your very quick answer to me was no. So
exactly. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, and just also with the landscape of what's taken place in college athletics, and most especially college football. I'm glad to be on this side of it and not involved with it anymore.
And when you look at the changing of collegiate athletics, as we know a lot of things to be, with NIL and the transfer portal and the NCAA transformation committee trying to distinguish who they are and what they are moving forward, a new president coming in, did any of that have to do with all these kind of the killing of the amateurism of the sport? Did that have any effect on you wanting to be a head coach?
The thing, the whole landscape has changed so much since I first got involved in coaching there at Syracuse, right out of finishing my playing days. And I've always wanted to be a head coach because you had a chance to impact young people, and you could give people opportunities to come and better themselves athletically, academically, and you could be an influence on them in terms of helping them grow as a young man into a man. And that was really the reason I got into coaching. And now, with the things that are going on, I think there's less of that than what it was before. And so that's the thing that I think is very, very difficult in this day and age with the NIL, the transfer portal, the way recruiting is transformed over the years. I just think it's done more harm to the young people than it's done good.
And when you say it's done more harm than good, why do you feel like the NIL world and the transfer portal have leaned more on the side of harming than helping?
Well, I've always was a proponent of giving young people a stipend. When I was coaching, I was proponent to say, okay, let's just add whatever that figure may be, $20,000, $10,000 onto their scholarship. So, you could give them a stipend, that they could have, so they wouldn't have to worry about certain things and do that. Now, with the NIL, basically what you're doing is you're buying players, in my mind. You're enticing kids coming out of high school, the boosters and the other people. And it's like whoever pays the most money, you professionalize the college game is what has happened with the NIL. And the other thing that I think is what's hurt is now I think you're even going to see a little bit more pressure put on these kids coming out of high school, and even in high school by their own parents, to do more and to be, elite or get themselves rated as a 4 or 5 star type kid. Because if you're a 4 or 5 star, now you might have a chance to get more money from an NIL deal and all that. And all this pressure that's being put on these kids, these young people can't be kids anymore. It's the world of, how much pressure can they be put under, and them to have to go out and succeed and to get these endorsements and to get, certain things. I just think that it's a path that's really going down the wrong road.
And like you said, looking at this, and if you're a 4-star or a 5-star, maybe you can increase your NIL deal, and pushing kids to do even more, to really not sleep, to constantly be working out, and to put themselves all into this, taking them away from schoolwork are arguably, in some of these cases, some states have approved that high school student athletes can get NIL deals. I have been very, very concerned about how NIL is handled in general. But when you include high school, and we're talking 14, 15, 16-year-old kids having car dealerships, or, signing autographs, or being at a game at 15 years old and telling, the local TV stations, I'm not doing interviews unless you guys give me $100 after the game or something. I mean, what do you think about that element of it? Because I do a lot of work with the high schools in central and upstate New York that I know you know all about, because you've always recruited this area. And getting to know these kids, being around them for almost a decade now, year to year, I am very, very concerned about a high school name, image, and likeness situation.
Well, I agree with you. And I just think, again, you're putting more pressure on a young person that isn't mature enough to handle that. And then some don't have the support systems at home to be able to handle some of those things. And then all of a sudden you get some handlers involved, or, certain agents involved. And now you end up having more issues, with this. So I think it's very, very difficult. I was talking with somebody just the other day, and I just said, I wish they would, and they probably can't, but I wish they would go back and kind of slow the process down instead of speeding the process up. And, because the thing that I look at, and, I follow it and everything else, but, I see all these names that go into the transfer portal, and I see this former 4-star or this former 5-star going in there, and, he hadn't played for 2 years where he was at. So, that's the other issue that I have, is the rankings that they put on these kids. And some of it's due to the pressure that college coaches put on the people from Rivals and Scout and all those sort of things. Say, hey, this guy's a good player, so they can end up getting their recruiting rankings up and have a better, ranking for their particular recruiting year. So I just worry the pressure. They talk about the student athlete welfare or young people welfare. I just worry about all the pressure that's put on these young kids, and in order to go out and try to perform and do the things that, you're supposed to do. It's no longer a game in college. It's all a big business now.
Well, and that's the thing. Speaking here with longtime coach Randy Edsall on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. What do you think are the potential long-term negative effects of treating a teenager like a professional athlete?
I think it's very difficult, and especially in the sport of football. Tennis is a little bit different because it's an individual game, and all those sort of things, or golf, things like that. But when you get to football, you're talking a team game. I just worry about the mental part of it with the young people and what happens to them. Here all of a sudden something happens, and then they become 21 years old, and now all of a sudden they lose it. And whether it's, it might be suicide, or it might be anxiety issues, it might be different things that come on. And I just think that, you really don't need to do that. And, I always go back to, I just remember, when I played, and you played 10 games, you were done the weekend before Thanksgiving. So you were home with your family for Thanksgiving. You earned your way into a bowl game. There wasn't 76 spots for bowls, for people to play in. And so if you played, you still had time to go home in Christmas. You could go home in the summer. And now you just have this, it's year round. And now even in high school, it's year round. Kids only play one sport for the most part. You don't see many multi-sport athletes anymore. And all that pressure to try to be good, to get a scholarship, to get an NOI. And then all of a sudden, when things don't go your way, well, we're just going to go up and transfer. So how do these kids learn how to fight through adversity? Because life is about adversity. And if you don't ever learn how to fight through that, and if you don't ever understand that, hey, you might not be the best player, but you stay there and you suck it up, and you finish up and you get your degree, and you're going to be probably better off than some of those guys who played, a lot while they were in college, because, you have a little bit more about you in terms of who you are and your makeup, that attracts people to you or businesses to you.
And Randy, I mean, if you were coaching right now and you realize that you had to re-recruit all 85 of your scholarship players, and then you have to go out and recruit more for the guys that are moving on, their eligibilities, finishing up and whatnot. If you were in a position like every other coach is now in Division 1A FBS football, where you would have to sit there and say, I have to re-recruit all the guys that just recruited, the guys that I recruited 2 years ago, the guys that recruited 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and I got to go get new guys. I mean, I would imagine you don't envy the world of today's college football coach, but just what you can say to that effect. If you feel like in your time coaching, you would want to truly, with the transfer portal being how it is, with no year in residency, and you can jump ship that first time and play immediately. If you would want to deal with your backup quarterback threatening to leave your team and your fourth wide receiver and your second corner, all saying, Randy, we're going to leave the team unless you play us right away because we can just go somewhere else and not have to sit.
Well, what I would do is I would look on, try to get myself involved and get to the NFL and be an NFL coach, because I think you're starting to see that a little bit more with, I think that's one of the big things with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. And I think that's some of the things that coaches, will do. And if I was a young guy aspiring, I would work to go to the NFL, because, the way they have it set up in college is very, very difficult. I mean, you as a college coach nowadays, you don't get a break. You never have a break. It's 24/7, 365. And then, like I said, like you said, after each year, you got to re-recruit somebody to stay with you. And then the other issue that you have, Dan, is this, and I know Syracuse has a lot of guys that are in the portal. And the other thing is, if here you go and recruit a guy that might have not been heavily recruited coming out of high school, and then you're a program and you're good at developing kids. And now what happens after you develop them in 2 years or whatever, 3 years, he goes and people come and poach him and reach out to him and everything else, and you lose him, and you don't get to reap the benefits of years, say 3, 4, and 5 with this kid that you develop, because he's going to leave you, and it's okay to do. Whereas like in the NFL, I mean, like I said, they've professionalized this whole thing. And, in the NFL, at least you have the guy for 5 years. You draft a guy and you got him for 5 years. In college, you're guaranteed 1 year. That's it. That's all you're guaranteed. Once a kid just commits to you, he could come in and be a freshman, all conference player or whatever. And if you're at a group of 5, or if you're at a lower Power 5 school, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the other schools, they're going to find a way to get to that kid to say, hey, you come here, we're going to give you a nice NIL deal, and he's gone. So that I wouldn't want to have to deal with it. And that was one of the things that I saw coming down the road, that I decided that hey, it's time to retire, because this is going in a place where it's not good for really anybody. And I don't care what anybody says. I mean, it's great that kids are being able to get some money, but it's not being done in the right way, in my opinion. They're being bought, and they might be doing something, but they're really not fulfilling the work part of it to make that money.
And Randy, you bring that up, and it's good to give the players something, these student athletes something, but that the way it's being done, it's crazy to me that at the beginning of all of this, when California passed this law, which forced the rest of the country to do something, or else California was going to reap the benefits and all of their teams and schools there were going to reap the benefits, that these other states had to do something about it. I think at the time where the NCAA, and I don't even know how the NCAA could do this, because I thought each state has their own government and states' laws. But when the NCAA was like, hey, whether or not you've approved of NIL, we're going to do this year where you're going to have to approve of it, and everybody's going to have it in all these schools, regardless of whether or not your state has any plans in place, any legislation in place. At the time that they did it, only a few states were putting things in place. Some states might have been against it. Some states wanted more information. So in that world where everything was kind of thrown out there no rules, no regulations, nothing to stop you. Things that you as a coach would have been put under scrutiny for and probably gotten punished by the NCAA are now legal to do. So, there's a question that was addressed last year. I was driving and listening to Sirius XM, and somebody said, did anybody see it coming that it was going to be this bad? And I very silently, while I drove in my car, raised my hand and said, how could you not see that opening the door to something with no rules, no regulations, and every state kind of willy-nilly do whatever they want to do, that this wasn't going to cause a problem? Randy, I guess my question to you is, how did the world not see that not having any type of barriers on this, fences on this, walls upon this, that once you unleash this beast upon the world, it was going to wreak havoc and eat whatever it wants and go wherever it wanted, because there was no fence to block it? I don't know how some people apparently didn't see this coming.
Well, my opinion with that, Dan, is this: the NCAA is a rudderless ship. There's nobody in charge, and if the NCAA would have been proactive in trying to do something where, they put, like a stipend in with the scholarship, they might have been able to avoid some of this stuff that they've gotten themselves into. But the problem is, you've got nobody controlling college athletics. The NCAA is a governing body, but they don't want to. All they want to do is try to, make as much money as they could instead of having a vision as to what's there. And I'll speak from a football standpoint. When you have an entity like college football, and you don't have full-time people that are in charge of that and working on all those issues on a day-to-day basis, this is what's going to cause you problems. And you know what? They still haven't learned their lesson, because you have people within the university structures who are on these committees and who are chairmen of these committees, but that's not their full-time job. Yeah. Their full-time job is being a university president, is being an athletic director or whatever. And, they can't devote all the full-time that you have to, because of how complex college football, college basketball, all athletics within a Division I school involves. So that's part of the problem, in my opinion, and that's why it is. And basically what they did, they legalized cheating. Things were happening where people were doing stuff under the table, but then they just said, okay, we're just going to basically legalize cheating. So now it's okay to cheat, and basically, that's what's taking place. And the schools that have the more money and have the big pocket donors, those are the people that are going to continue to, rise up. And that's why I think they should get to a point where you take the Power Fives and just go and have your own conference, take the Group of Fives, and you call it whatever you want to call it, and have a 12 or 16 team playoff, there like they do in 1AA, Division II and Division III. And then this way, you actually earn your way into a championship in terms of winning your conference, or you finish second and you get a chance to go to the playoff. So you don't have 6 and 6 teams going to bowl games, and because ESPN's the one who's making all the money off of that. So to me, there's got to be, it's all going to come to a head at some point in time. But like right now, to me, it's just out of control. And you take a look at the thing that's changed, and you look at it, take a look at what's happened in college football. Like I said, it's basically professionalism, because now you go and take a look at a coaching staff. Schools have a general manager, they have a director of player personnel, they have a college scouting department to scout the guys that are in the portal. They have a high school scouting department, for kids in high school. And what's really happening, Dan? The kids in high school are losing out on opportunities because of the portal, because there's some schools that won't go and recruit high school kids unless he's a really good one. And what they're going to do is they're always going to supplement their roster by going through the portal. So now you're limiting the number of opportunities for kids to go to the FBS because of what's happening with the transfer portal.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of points here, and you talked about the NCAA not really having control over anything that's going on. Mark Emmert, the president that decided with the NCAA that he's going to be stepping down, he said at the beginning of the pandemic something that I thought was insane to say publicly, whether or not you think it. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, "I have no control over college football. I can't tell a school whether or not they can compete. I can't tell a conference," because this was during COVID, and whether or not, schools were going to be out there and leagues were going to decide to play. And he said, "I have no control over it. There is no czar. People say they want a czar, but they really don't want one." And when Mark Emmert said, "I have no control over college football," I said, "Okay, but you have an over $1 million contract. So if you're the boss of nothing, to give the money back." And really, it's not that people thought college football had control, but when the president of the NCAA says, "I have no control over the school, I have no control over the conference." If I was a coach, if I were you or I were one of your players and you got suspended for a game or a player got suspended, it makes no sense to say, "I can't keep a school from playing, I can't keep a conference from playing." Well, who's within that conference? The school. Who's within the school? The coach and the player. So if I got suspended from the NCAA, I would play, because if you can't stop my school, then I don't really want. If you can't reprimand them, how are you going to reprimand me? And how's it going to stick? And so I think the NCAA said a lot of things publicly or done a lot of things that have left me with really questioning how they can suspend anybody, punish anybody, because if you don't have control of the overseeing body, how can you have any control of what's within that body?
Well, you're exactly right, and he's right. The NCAA, he doesn't have any control over. College football controls itself. It's not like basketball, because all the revenues that goes to the college football playoff, and that gets all dispersed and everything else. And just like with the bowl games, they're just the governing body, for football. And even Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, he even says that I don't want basically the Group of Five schools determining the rules that we want to play by, so you have that void, between, the Power Five and the Group of Five. So that's where, ultimately, I think you're going to have to, where there's going to be a separation. Now, who wants to go and put all that together? Because then you're going to have, a governing body. You're going to have a compliance part of it. You're going to have to put the rules in there. But this is what they've gone to. And if you don't, you're going to continue to have all these issues that you have, right now. And I think you're going to even have more issues because you're never going to get your hands around everything that needs to be done.
And you bring it up, and I said it within the last couple of years. Well, yeah, a couple of years ago, that I thought the SEC was just going to break off and be its own thing. The Power Five is a media term. The autonomy group is a legislative term, and autonomy by definition is self-governing. And I've spoken with people within the autonomy group of the Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, ACC, and SEC. And I said, "Could you break away?" And they said, "Well, yeah." I was like, "Well, have you thought about it?" They said, "Not, we've talked about it, but not necessarily now." Now, this was years ago. This was, more than 5 years ago. But they said it's not out of the realm of possibility, just not right now. But when you seek to tell the NCAA that we want change, and you seek the word autonomy to be part of the legislative terminology of who you are, that means that essentially you have a sleeping giant within the NCAA that at any given time can say, "We're leaving." Now, the SEC, if they can find a way to get some of these ACC schools that I think potentially they might want to keep those rivalries with, Clemson, South Carolina, having Florida State and different pieces of that, maybe Louisville, Kentucky. If they can lure some of those schools and get to 20, in my opinion, and I've thought this for years now, a couple of years now, the SEC is going to be its own league. The Big 10 was going to maybe try to go with them or maybe play a championship against them. Maybe that could be. I don't know how the Big 10 fits in, because I don't think anybody can hold a candle in college.
I think the other issue you have, Dan, with the Big 10, they see themselves as more of an academic conference as well. The academics component is something that I think is important to the Big 10. Not saying it isn't with the SEC, but that's why I think you saw them. They went and got USC and UCLA, but what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, I could see them going and trying to do that, and then the Big Ten going west and taking more teams from the Pac-12 and doing that to, enhance them. But what, to me, I think one of the telltale signs is here that's just happened in the last day is when you see the commissioner from the Big Ten Conference, leaving to go to the Chicago Bears to become president and CEO. I think he's had it up to here of dealing with presidents and dealing with all these people where he said, I'm going back to the NFL where I got to deal with basically an owner and you only have this and everybody understands and all the complexities, because you don't see conference commissioners leaving those jobs until, they retire or whatever. You don't see people leaving that. So that, I thought that was really interesting that here he is after a short period of time. And, he did get USC and UCLA in there, but, I thought that was interesting because it's almost like saying, hey, this thing's out of control and I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. I'm going and off in this venture and going back to the NFL. It's kind of like a coach. Here he came from the NFL to the Big Ten. Now he's going back to the NFL.
And it's really, and like you brought it up, a perfect conversation segue here to Kevin Warren. When he came in as Big Ten commissioner, he kind of came in that the feel of it was like, how long is he going to be here? Is he like the interim guy? Is he the face for the future? Because he came in amidst all the chaos. And the notion was, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep him? So it's kind of ironic that he decided to go. He decided to leave the Big Ten, where I don't know if there were plans for him and the Big Ten to be together for a really long time or what that was going to look like. But like you said, to play into what you were talking about before, he's there, and you would think he's got the Big Ten next to the SEC in college football is the second best conference. You just got USC and UCLA. You made these huge moves. You just signed this mega TV deal. Why would somebody leave a conference that is in the top two, can start its own thing, has spread out west, and just made a massive deal amongst multiple different broadcast networks? I mean, it sounds like the perfect job to keep, doesn't it? Unless what you're talking about is true.
It is. And take a look from Mike Tranghese to all the other commissioners, Swafford, Jim Delaney, Mike Slive, those guys, people don't leave, those jobs, they just don't. And to see that happening, I think that's a red flag going up on college athletics as well. And it's just very, very interesting. And like I said, I was talking to a guy today, and he's connected, and we know some of the same people and other head coaches. And he says, talking to you and talking to these other guys, he says, you all say the same thing. You're so glad that you're out of it. You don't have to be involved with, all these things going on. And then, you just read the comments from the head coaches and everything else who are in it nowadays. And I can guarantee you, that they don't like it. And, the other thing is too, is like, when you go to this 12-team playoff, those teams that are in the playoff and they keep going, they're not going to get any break because now they're going to be playing through December, and then you're going to have to recruit. One of the things they could do to help them, but they won't do this, but, they should move the signing date back to like April 1st, and don't let the coaches go out recruiting during the season so they can coach their own guys and be around their own guys. And, let the kids go and play their senior year and have a good time. And all this early offering and early commitment stuff, it's not good for anybody. When you see because you see these kids, they make commitments, and then they change them. So, it's like they don't make a commitment. That's one of the issues that I have. Commitment doesn't mean anything. And then plus, then you don't have to worry. These ADs, if they want to make a change, you don't fire a guy midway through the season. Get through the season and then make the change. And then, start your recruiting periods in February and March and have a signing date on April 1st. They don't get accepted to colleges, most, if you're not on scholarship until, about that time anyhow. So, just move it back. I mean, all this, Joe Paterno was the guy who started all the early offering and everything else. And, let these kids be kids and enjoy their their high school years and stop putting all this pressure on them. But that's never going to happen.
Well, and you look at, like you said, I mean, the early signing period also, has made it a lot easier for kids to come to campus in January instead of June. So how would you battle that back if you say, okay, move the signing date to April 1st? Well, that would mean that nobody could be at spring practice and enroll early into college. So how would you respond to student athletes saying that they're going to miss out on the spring?
Yeah, and and that's another thing that I think is crazy. And that, hey, to each his own. If a kid wants to graduate in 3 years and leave high school and miss out, but then go back. I mean, I don't know. I was never a big proponent of that. Stay there for your high school years and finish out. And now they move it all up, and guys can get done and go enroll. And how many of them go in at mid? It'd be an interesting study. How many guys go in at mid-year? Okay, and then play the following fall, who have the advantage of just having a spring practice. That would be the thing to see. I don't know. You don't want to say. Like I said, when I see how many guys go into the portal and everything else, and I see all these things that happen. Who was it? There was a kid that committed to Miami, quarterback. Then he changed and flipped and went to Florida. Signed a national letter of intent because he got a big NIL. Now, supposedly, the rumor is he's got a bigger NIL deal, and Florida didn't fulfill the promises on his NIL deal. So now he wants out of his letter of intent. He was going to roll in January, wants out of his letter of intent to be able to go somewhere else. So, I mean, all these issues, it just, I don't know. It was interesting because being down here in Florida, where I'm at, somebody showed me back at the beginning of the season, one of the guys I play golf with is a Florida alum, former football player and NFL player and former coach. He showed me a picture of Florida's team picture, and Florida has 104 people working with their football staff, between coaches and quality, all that stuff, managers. They have as many support people as they have players on the team. It was unbelievable how big the roster was, how big the picture was.
I think, and when you were saying that, a crazy juxtaposition to put up for teams is to put up, like, take a team picture and put that up for 2023. And then in 2024, take another team picture and see how many players are not there because of the transfer portal. Can put this up and say, okay, here's our 85 and 52 of them came back. I mean, as a coach, I would imagine right now in this world, and I was figuring out with Syracuse and with Dino Babers, I was like, okay, mathematically, if my numbers are correct, he's got to fill at least 20 scholarship spots. And in the early signing period in December, he brought in 20 because I was looking at it saying, okay, with guys in the transfer portal, guys who finish their eligibility, guys going to the NFL, he's got to make up for like 20 spots. That situation that you don't have to deal with right now, how difficult is it, coming from a coach who's coached as long as you have, Randy? How difficult is it for you to recruit with your staff during the season while you're coaching, trying to win games, planning for a bowl game while you're recruiting amidst all of this, and then having to make up for guys that are leaving early, guys that are transferring, guys that are finishing their eligibility? How much of a musical chair conundrum is that for a coach, from your perspective, constantly having to sit down and say, okay, how many roster spots do we have? Like, what are we losing? What are we gaining? And that could change in a day or two.
Oh, it's very difficult, and when you only had the one signing date in February, you could go out and watch a kid and evaluate a kid, playing in high school football. But you didn't have to make as many decisions, then, because, you had to the first Wednesday in February, once you got through your season. And then also the other thing that comes into play too, Dan, is now what's happening too. And this happened to me right before I left is, you have some kids that'll come back in and they'll start the spring semester. And then after being there for 2 days, they're going to come to you and say, hey, I'm transferring, because they need that semester to graduate. And if they do it before, well, they're not going to be on scholarship. Well, now they come in and roll in classes and go to class, that first day. And then they come in and say, I'm not there. And so now here you are, where kids that you might have wanted, you can't get now. So it's very vicious cycle that's that's taking place right now, and because it's a numbers game, you know. And the one thing I saw the NCAA did, I mean, they allow you to bring in more than 25 in a year. But see, and here's the other thing too that I don't like, because this is happening all over the place as well. Coaches will go out and recruit kids, and now with the transfer portal, what they'll do is a kid comes in and all of a sudden the kid doesn't work out the way that the coach thought he would, or wasn't as productive as he thought he would be. They tell the kid he should go in the portal and leave. You know, my thing is, hey, you made the evaluation, and if the kid's out there working and doing everything he's supposed to be doing, you know, you shouldn't tell him he's got to go into the portal. You know, you're the one who made that evaluation. And if he's not good enough, that's more on you if the kid's out there doing everything he's asking to do. And, you know, I just know this from my standpoint. I wasn't as, you know, that I didn't play hardly at all when I was at Syracuse. People in front of me, Bill Hurley and those guys, they were better, you know, but I just busted my butt. And that's one thing I always respected about Frank Maloney and Tom Coughlin, who I played for as a quarterback coach, but Frank was the head coach. You know, they didn't do that, you know, I mean, and like I said, look where I'm at today. Whereas if they, you know, had that, and that's what's happening nowadays, that there are schools that are telling kids that, hey, you should leave because, you know, you're never going to play here, you know. And maybe a kid doesn't want to, maybe, you know, that education and being there with those guys and everything else. So that's another issue that you have with that. But it's very hard to manage the numbers when you have the things that they have involved today in terms of trying to run a program.
You know, and I had a kid tell me that the school that he was at, they said to him, like, hey, you're going to be fine. If you want to transfer, you could go ahead and transfer, because they basically told him, like, this, you know, we brought you in to play this position and to do this. And then there really wasn't a place for him. It wasn't because he wasn't productive. It wasn't because he wasn't good. They just weren't going to utilize that position. And so here he is being told, hey, you could stay on the team, but there's nothing here for you. So basically you could stay, but we really don't need you to stay or necessarily want you here. And so he goes in the transfer portal, gets recruited by a lot of different teams, a lot of schools in the quote unquote Power Five, and he makes his decision, and he gets told by the school, your credits are fine. You're almost graduated. You'll be good to go. He commits to that school. The credits don't transfer. He calls back to the school that he's at, and they tell him, guess what? Not our problem. So he's trying to figure out a school to go to. He ends up going to a school that's down from where he wants to be, nowhere close to the level of competition that he wanted, not the offense that he wanted. He goes there, he plays there, and then he says, well, you know what? I want to get my degree from the school I started at, so let me call them back. I was their student athlete. I need one internship to graduate. 3 credits, that's it. The school said, well, you're not one of our student athletes anymore. $30,000.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I've told kids that, you know, they're looking to maybe transfer and they got 1 semester left. I've told them, I said, you know, since I've been out, I said, stay where you're at, get your degree. Once you get your degree, then go ahead and go into the portal. Because you know what, if it doesn't work, if the football doesn't work out, you got your degree from the school that you intended to go to get your degree from. And you know, that's what you should do, because, you know, like I said, it's not a young man's fault unless he just totally not working or doing anything. But, you know, people make evaluations.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then you got to live with your evaluation. It's not, you know, like I said, if it was pro football where you can cut them, I mean, that's really what it's coming down to. But it's coming down to where a kid has a 1-year contract, and that's it. He's got a 1-year contract, and there's no more guarantee, you know, past that. And really, it's the same thing, you know, for the school because of what they've done with the transfer portal. And it's a dog eat dog world right out now in college football, in my opinion.
Where does education fall when you're professionalizing an amateur sport?
It doesn't. You know, I mean, people can talk about the student athlete. It isn't about the student athlete anymore. It's all about the athlete. You know, when it's the student part of it, the NCAA shouldn't even use that term anymore because it's a fraud, in my opinion. Because if it was about the student athlete, then you wouldn't have, you know, some of the issues that you have right now. And, if a kid goes there and if he follows the rules, that kid should be able to stay there, until he graduates. And that's not happening at every place.
Randy Edsall here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. Randy, before I let you go, college football playoff has expanded. You were a part of the American Athletic Conference for a time when you came back to UConn. So your take on the fact that now in 2024, the college football playoff is going to have 12 spots, the top 6 conference championship winners of 6 different conferences there, the highest ranked 6 conference champions are going to have the opportunity to go into the college football playoff. And then there's going to be 6 at-large bids. So those 6 at-large, obviously people that have connections and backdoor deals and whatever that is, they'll still get their fair shake of that. But the top 6 conferences ranked wise, whoever their champion is in their conference game at the end of it all is going to be in the college football playoff, which means, conferences like the Sun Belt and the American Athletic Conference will have an automatic qualifier now to get in the college football playoff. Your thoughts on the new format of 6 and 6 and adding in that 6th conference champion, which means outside of the Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and ACC, we will have at least one other conference in the college football playoff every year.
Well, I think that's great that they expanded it, and that a group of 5 basically team is going to have that opportunity to have an automatic spot in there. But I'll be surprised if it's any more than one anyhow. It'll be that one. And so basically it's what you have almost right now, or have at least, well, it's not automatic, but at least there's an automatic now. And it'll be interesting just to see how it all turns out, and the one thing that I just wish that my thing is, because this is what it's going to come to, I just wished what they would do, because Tulane had a great year and beat USC and all those sort of things, but it's great, but they don't have the wherewithal to do that either. You can't, and it's hard to make the playoff more than what they have it, but I still think they should, just because this is where it's going heading anyhow, take those 5 conferences, the ACC, the Big 10, Pac-12, SEC, and Big 12, take them, go form your own thing, have a playoff, let the group of 5 have their playoff, and just do it like you do with 1AA, Division II, and Division III, and then you're starting that now with that, but just make it separate, because it's going to involve more people, and then it gives all those other conferences, because to me nowadays the bowl games really don't mean anything. You've got a playoff, and the bowl games, they're there, but a bowl game, when you had the bowl games, it was a reward. Now it's not a reward when you're 6 and 6. It's everybody gets a trophy. When you have almost the number of teams that go and the number of 6 and 6, and you even had 5 and 7 teams, that's not a reward. And what are you teaching people? That's what I get back to. You work to win your conference. You win your conference, you get to go and play. Or if you finish second, you get to go in, to do that. But now it's just not that way, any longer.
Well, I think what you're seeing now is, like you said, everybody gets a trophy, is you are now congratulating people on mediocrity.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing is you're letting ESPN make money. You're letting ESPN make money by the programming, and it's cheap programming for ESPN, and ESPN doesn't pay those people. And then when those teams go to those bowl games, they probably lose money anyhow. So it's not, one of those things. And, this way the kids would be able to have a chance to, to be home for Christmas. And it's gotten, like I said, it's gotten so professionalized that it's sad to see the direction that it's going to, in my opinion, and until they get somebody that can take control, and there's somebody running it, and you're staying on top of all the different things that you have to in terms of compliance, doing things the right way, the recruiting, and for the what's in the best interest everybody talks about all these young people and the issues they have with anxiety and different issues and stress and all that stuff.
Yeah.
All you're doing is you're just putting that much more anxiety and much more stress on them with how you're conducting at least college football, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for you, I mean, because of all these changes happen and you decided to retire from the coaching world in college football, your last few months there, did you feel like you could be a coach? Did you feel like you were a general manager? I mean, what did the seat that you sat in feel like the last few months comparative to years before as a head coach?
Well, because of the way they did everything, it became where you were everything. You were a coach, you were a parent away from home, you were a general manager, you were an academic counselor, you were everything because of all the things that you had to do. And now for coaches, and that's why I think you're seeing all these people, they're hiring a general manager, they're hiring a director of player personnel, they're doing all these things. So basically it's become, professionalized. And, take your scouting staff and let them go out and scout games, or if you want to, and leave the coaches with those, because everybody talks about the kids all the time. Well, you know what? Let the coaches be around them more, and to do those things. So, but it's difficult. It's hard. And like I said, I think you're seeing a lot of the head coaches come out and start to say things, about not that they don't want to work, but there's no break. I mean, Kirby Smart, he's on the phone the next day, recruiting kids after he won his second national championship. And, he's back out on the road now. They just finished. And, those teams, they really didn't even get a break over Christmas. And those kids go right from that back into school and back into their off-season program. And then they're going to be in spring ball in a month and a half.
Well, it's funny, but it's sad that, I mean, the old statement, let the coaches coach and the players play. How many coaches are just coaching and how many players are going out there without, like you said, all this added anxiety and different pieces to it. We open a lot of doors to a lot of conversation. There's a lot of meat to this sandwich, Randy. And if it did anything, it just made everybody watching and listening, I think, want to talk about it more. You've been great at answering my questions. So we do a thing on the show called Rapid Fire, which allows somebody to go on the hot seat and you can ask sports related or anything related questions. Could be music, movies, TV, whatever. And so you've been great about answering all my questions. So I'm going to not put you on the hot seat. I'm going to put myself on the hot seat. You can ask me any 3 questions. And as a head coach, Randy, I know that you maybe have never been able to ask anybody a question, but you've been asked them a billion times. And I know by your face in some of those press conferences, and I know about a lot of those phone calls that I was on in the teleconferences. I remember getting on the phone going, yeah, I don't think Randy's going to like that one. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask me 3 questions, Randy, whatever you want, whenever you're ready.
Well, who's the favorite person that you've ever covered?
I would have to say, there's been many wonderful people on this show. I can't really say that there's been bad people on the show. There was a couple of players that I had in the NFL that were a little moody in training camp, but maybe that was just for that day. So I would say I've had a lot of great experiences with a lot of great people. And I would say probably one of 2 people have become 2 of my closest friends. One of them is in heaven and one of them is here on earth. And you might know both of them very well. I know you know one of them very well, but Floyd Little and I built a tremendous friendship the last 8 years of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I will never forget, that man was like talking to a ghost, larger than life. It was like being in A Christmas Carol every day. Like, how am I allowed to talk to this guy? And he would turn around in a press conference at Syracuse and he'd be all decked out, his suit to the nines. At 70 something years old, he looked like he could still play football. He was just big and tough and sweet and kind and believed in God, morals and values. And he would turn around with everybody in that room and he would look right at me and he'd go, Dan, there he is. And he gave me a huge hug. Like I was the only person he wanted to say hello to.
Right.
And I can't even imagine somebody who had the whole world looking at him, treating me the way that he did. And that humbles me. And I would say one of my other favorites ever, because he has become one of my best friends in the whole entire world. He's a brother to me. And he's one of your guys that you recruited, is Rob Drummond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Rob
Rob's a special guy. I love Rob. I mean, he talk about a guy that just came to work and wasn't a heavily recruited kid and just came to work and did what he was supposed to do and worked his tail off. I mean, love the guy, love what he's been able to do. So what do you do what do you do for, to get away from your job? When you get away from your job, what's the number one thing you like to do?
Sleep. uh, I would say I do like to sleep, but I would say, Randy, probably some of my favorite things to do when there's a few things in life, and you can probably attest to some things too as a coach, because it's funny in my job of owning my own business now for over 10 years and running a multimedia marketing company, being a broadcaster of 20 years this November, that I started when I was 17 or 18. So I would tell you that my work is it's a part of my life every day. And I've had coaches say to me, when they're talking about all the travel they're doing, the run around and all these things, one of the coaches said to me, he goes, well, you get it. Like you live the life too, even though you're not a coach, you live a similar life to us. And again, that humbled me. So I pay attention to the things where I could shut my brain off. And I'd love to know if you have any of these, but when I play basketball, because I played that all my life, I don't think when I play basketball. When I'm very in tune with music, I've been singing all my life since I was 3. So if I'm singing, cooking, cleaning like if I'm washing dishes, or if I am playing basketball, I can totally shut my brain off. So I'm not the person that like needs the beach. Sometimes I just need to like go in the kitchen and whip something up, and that gives me a lot of peace.
Last question.
Yeah.
So if you were the czar of college football, what's the 2 biggest things that you would change?
I bring back Randy Edsall. So I would the two things that Randy, you can say whatever you want, but I'm going to say this because I'm allowed to say this, is that I wish I had an era of Syracuse football, because it's my hometown, where Randy Edsall was my coach, because you love Northeast, you recruit the Northeast, you've done it everywhere you've been, you've respected the kids, you've respected where you came from, you've respected the community. Everybody talks highly of you that I've connected with in that respect, including Rob. And you are a gem that we didn't get to see in Orange, and that makes me sad. So I will say that as a side note, because I'm allowed to. And the 2 things I would change, if I was the czar of college football right now, what would I do? I would, man, I'd have some rules and regulations, that's for sure. So, because there are none. So I would definitely put some rules and regulations around NIL and the transfer portal. I would make everything throughout the country the same. And I would start to try and destroy the class system of college football. And the second thing that I would do is I would have an actual ruling body create scheduling and season things and stuff that we've talked about around student athletes actually getting to be students. So I think if I was the czar of college football, I would put an emphasis on academics and hold people accountable to that. And I would have rules for NIL and the transfer portal to try and keep and protect the sanctity of my student athletes, because where they are right now is just if anybody knows anything about DC and Batman, college football is Gotham City right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would agree. And I appreciate those remarks. And, but it's kind of sad to see, for me anyhow, to see, where it's going. But I mean, and it's even like when you say putting everybody on a level playing field. That's never going to happen in college. In the NFL, you have that because you have a salary cap, and now in college, you don't. I mean, there is no salary cap with all this stuff going on. The SEC is always gonna be up there just because of who they are, and it's going to be hard I mean, to me, there's only probably 6 or 8 teams that have a chance to even be national champions in football. I mean, I really believe that, and that's where I think, okay, take your autonomy or a Power 5, create your own thing, Group of 5, because now you got a chance to be a national championship where they don't have a chance, and so I don't know, but that'll never happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, and I did break it up like that. I broke it up to the SEC by itself, and maybe the Big Ten trying to go, but the SEC would be alone, and then the rest of the FBS would have to come together and take the Group of 5 and the rest of the Power 5 and band together and figure that out, because the Big 12 hasn't been as powerful and the Pac-12 hasn't been as powerful. So figure out what exactly that means, and essentially you would have 3 tiers of Division 1. You'd have the SEC or SEC Big 10. You'd have the rest of the 8 conferences or 9 conferences, and then you would have, Division 1 AA. So I still think it is heading to a world where the SEC is going to be alone, because Randy, you and I of sound mind cannot argue against a college football playoff, even this year, that would have had Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, Georgia. I mean, I think Tennessee with 2 losses and LSU with 3 losses, those were 2 of the most dangerous teams this season. And there was a time where I thought LSU was the most dangerous team in college football, and we didn't get to see either of them in the college football playoff. So I think a lot of years we can argue that the SEC, expansion to 12, we can argue that the SEC is going to take 4 of those 6 at-large spots.
Well, no question. And the other thing that's going to happen too is, you got to get to where people are, each conference is going to play the same number of conference games. You can't have people playing 1 AA anymore, different things along those lines. And I think you're going to end up seeing where you're going to play, the SEC is going to play, the Big 12, and then the Group of 5, they're not going to get those guarantee games. So they're not going to get that. So I think that's the thing. It's got to go to a different system, to 2 different tiers at least. And because, like I said, they're not going to be able to compete. And then the same thing, if you're going to try to get to the playoff and all those sort of things, your non-conference schedule has something to do with that too. Not only your conference schedule, but then your non-conference schedule. Who are you playing non-conference? Because if you're playing some really tough teams, non-conference, you could lose one of those games or, whatever, and that could really hurt you because somebody else, doesn't lose to, or 2 losses, and the 2 teams you played or whatever are much tougher than the team that only had 1 loss and everything. So,
and my whole thing is with the SEC going to 16 and bringing in Oklahoma and Texas, why would you even want to play a non-conference schedule?
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Why, when you have that many teams, you should play 11 games, and then, and just take a look though. So now you're playing 11, you're going to play a conference championship game. That's 12. And then what, to win the national championship, that's 4 more. Right. And so that's 16 games. That's an NFL season now for the 2 teams that get to the finals. 16 games, and so if you start Labor Day weekend, you're going to the first weekend in January, and you get 1 bye, those kids don't get a break. Those kids don't go home for Christmas, and they come back and they're basically starting school. So what happens for those kids, So, and then after a week or 2, they're back into their off-season program. Whereas in the NFL, you finish your season, you don't come back in for OTAs until March or so.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you're going to make a college student athlete have to go all year round, but even NFL players get time off when they're getting paid millions of dollars, that's not going to make sense. And does the NFL really want the wear and tear on those bodies? And now you're going to take their product and dilute their product a little bit when they're drafting guys. So eventually, like you said, the bow breaks at some point because the pendulum can only swing so far before it swings back in the other direction.
But some of these kids, if they get the right NIL deal, they don't need the NFL. They'll make enough money while they're in college. You know, what they get in the NFL, you know. So it's really, I mean, it's really interesting. But I just think, you know, the money has caused all this to happen. It's the money that the entity can make, and then, you know, is what's happened. And you know, they tried to put it back into students, you know, into the students. But, you know, the other thing is, the other people that have it right, in my opinion, is the Ivy League. You know, they got it right. You know, you play 10 games, you know, they start the week after, they finish the week before Thanksgiving. You know, that's where now you can call those kids student athletes.
Yeah.
But other people in Division III, you know, pretty much probably, because they don't play as many, but the Division I, it's professionalized now, and it's never going back.
Well, that's the thing, is they say you can't shut Pandora's box. I mean, that's just the reality of it all. So once it's open, that's why you do your checks and balances and your research beforehand, and you don't let things come out willy-nilly like the NIL and the transfer portal. Because if you have something with no rules, and then years later you say, let's put some rules on it, well, now do you start punishing for the people that broke those rules that weren't in place before? So it's a giant cluster, Randy. And you and I we have the beauty of being able to talk about it without having to deal with the headache of it. So.
Oh, I tell you what, I just, you know, I'm just glad that I don't have to do with that anymore. I mean, it was great while I was coaching, and I loved it and everything else. But now, with all the things that have come about in the last year and a half, you know, somebody else can take care of that, and I don't have to worry about it. I can just sit here and do my passion, which is play golf every day.
Yeah. I didn't realize you play golf as much as you do, which is
I played 243 rounds of golf last year.
Oh my Lord. Now, have you always been an avid golfer?
Yeah, I played football, basketball, and baseball growing up, and then I played golf in the summertime.
Okay.
You know, while I was in high school, and then you go to college, you don't play as much. But
yeah,
you know, I mean, I love to play. I play here at our club. It's less than 5 minutes from my house, and every Wednesday afternoon, myself and Tom Coughlin, and he lives right up the street, Mike Malarkey, former head coach in the league, we go out and play 9 holes together, and, you know, have a good time. But I usually get up every morning and have an 8 o'clock tee time, and, you know, enjoy the heck out of it.
I have to make a final note here, because you dropped these names like it was like, oh, no big deal. Mike Malarkey, what's it like golfing with Mike Malarkey and Tom Coughlin? By the way, Tom Coughlin, when he came back to the Jaguars, I went over and I spoke with him. I don't know if he'll remember this, a couple of years ago, but when he came back, the media, it looked like a ton of people in the media were afraid to talk to him, because, you know, Tom's like, he's a real guy. Like, if you want respect from him, then you have to earn it. And
exactly.
So here's Tom Coughlin, and I don't want to talk to anybody else in the room more than Tom. No offense to anybody. And I walked up to Tom and I started talking with him, and we were laughing. And then people kind of looked, and then we laughed some more, and people looked again. And it's like, what is he doing to him? I was talking to Tom about Syracuse, my hometown, him playing there, being there. And when he was there, my grandfather and my great-grandfather on my dad's side had the Ralph James food trucks, and they had the first food trucks of their kind in like the entire country. And the way that they set up the kitchen and everything they had 4 trucks on campus at SU, and they were there when Tom Coughlin was there, and they called it the Dingle Man because they'd ring the bell and people would come out all hours of the day. Jim Brown, Floyd Little, Dale Shackelford, Roosevelt Bowie, Tom Coughlin, you know, Ernie Davis, John Mackey. And I was talking to him about it, and I go, I'm from Syracuse. He's like, get out. No, you're not. And I was talking about it. I said, yeah, I am. And then I said, you remember the Dingle Man truck, the Ralph James truck? I go, that's my family. And he hits me. He's like, there's no way that's your I said, I swear to you, that's my family. So,
I got food from that.
Oh, you did too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. See.
Yeah.
And I never knew anything about it. My dad, because my grandfather's passed away when I was little, and I was 6. And so he brought me, I think I have it somewhere in the studio. He brought me the book, and he opens up this giant brown book, and it has all of these articles about them, pictures, songs about them, poems that people wrote. and all these amazing stories about my family's food trucks. And so I think it's awesome that you got to enjoy it. So you met my great grandfather and my grandfather. Do you
Mhm.
remember what you ordered on those trucks or no?
Oh God, I don't remember that. But I'll tell you, it's fun. It's fun when we play because we have a lot of laughs, and we're out there and just different things. And Tom and I will talk about some of the stuff that happened up at Syracuse, and then I hear some things about certain people and let him know. And then Mike also, Jim Rogers coached at Florida when Mike was there, and Jim coached at Syracuse when I was there, when Tom was there, and all that. So we got a bunch of mutual friends. And then Tom and Mike, they were head coaches at the same time in the NFL. So we have a great time, and it's fun, and the weather and everything else is nice. So it's just nice to be able to enjoy yourself, and because it's like you go to work every day, you work the 15, 16-hour days as a coach, and you put everything into it. But hey, when it was time to finish, I finished, and now, like I said, I'm traveling and doing different things and with my wife, and it's fun and just enjoying it, and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think Tom said to me, I said something to him about Floyd, and he goes, and he said something, I said something to him about Floyd at the Ralph James truck, and he goes, Floyd never paid for his food. So, I do but yeah, Tom was great. It was great to finally talk with him and get to do that. But yeah, there's all these people in the media that know him as like this angry, strict. And I was like, you just have to talk to him about things that he likes. I mean,
Right.
with any human being, just be an honest person that is who they say they are, and respect the person that you're talking to, and you'd be amazed how people open up. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, hey, I know you're coming. I know you're coming down here to Jacksonville to cover the game, and just bring a little bit of heavy. You don't need all the winter gear that you have up there in Syracuse, but it'll be a little bit cooler down here tomorrow.
Yeah, I know all about that now. Thanks you telling me. But yeah, it would definitely be great to catch up with you, and just always happy to talk with you, Randy. So look forward to having you back on soon. And based on our conversation and the relationship we built, I'm looking forward to our off the air stuff as well, and getting to spend some time with you, some quality time.
Well, I know I'm gonna come up to Syracuse, and I think it's in June for the Marcus Paul Foundation tournament. So I'll be up in Syracuse for that, and I'm gonna try to get up to a game this fall, maybe when they have this football alumni weekend. So I'm gonna try to get up for a game this year. So
Yeah, so we'll spend some time together. We'll get some quality time in at some point.
all righty,
All right, thank
sounds
you.
good.
Appreciate it.